Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back, way, way back, to a time when winter meal prep didn't mean a cozy casserole or an oat milk latte, but a desperate scramble to keep your stomach from eating itself. You're standing in the heart of a medieval village, frost nibbling at your fingertips, the air sharp enough to bite back. The hearth smoke curls through the thatched roofs, and the fields beyond are nothing but white silence. You probably won't survive this winter, just saying. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and your local time in the comments so I know who's freezing with us tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander down a narrow lane where snow has crusted over the mud, each crunch beneath your boots echoing against timber walls. The scent of wood smoke, salted fat, and desperation hangs in the air. Every door hides a family, huddled around a dim fire, rationing out the fruits of their autumn labor. Somewhere a dog whines. Somewhere else, someone stirs a pot of something that used to be vegetables, once upon a warmer time. The first thing you realize, survival isn't about courage, it's about planning. You glance at the storehouse, a low, cold building packed with sacks of grain, clay jars sealed with wax, and salted slabs hanging like forgotten ghosts. By December, that storehouse becomes the heart of life. Every spoonful taken is a wager. Will this stretch until spring? You duck inside one of the cottages. The air is thick, warm, almost choking with the scent of burning peat. A woman kneels by the fire, stirring a pot with a wooden spoon older than she is. You see her eyes flicker between the simmering broth and the ceiling beams where onions hang like chandeliers of hope. It's not luxury, it's strategy. Back then, everything revolved around the rhythm of seasons. Summer meant abundance, but winter was a test. Starve or save, that was the game. A famous medieval chronicle from around the 14th century describes how villagers would hold little ceremonies to bless their food stores, hoping divine intervention would keep rats and hunger at bay. Scholars still argue whether these rituals were religious devotion or early crowd control, keeping everyone calm while supplies dwindled. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the shutters. You tighten your cloak, watching frost etch delicate patterns across the window glass. The sound of it, the whisper of ice forming, is almost hypnotic. You imagine the village as a living thing, breathing slower, quieter, conserving its strength. Oddly enough, hunger had its own culture. People gave names to the months based on their misery. January was the wolf's month in some places, a time when wolves, half mad with starvation, crept close to villages. February was the hunger moon. You could almost taste the fear in the air. You step back outside and pass a man chopping wood with a weary rhythm, his breath misting in the twilight. Each log split isn't just for warmth. It's the difference between life and frostbite. He nods at you without words. In winter, talk wastes breath. You find yourself near the communal well, its rim frozen, the bucket rope stiff with ice. Someone's left a loaf of dark, dense bread on the ledge, broken in half. Maybe an offering, maybe just forgotten. You take a piece. It's hard as stone, rough on the tongue, but strangely comforting. That's when you realize hunger sharpens gratitude like a knife. A historical fact slips quietly into your mind. In the winter of 1315 to 1317, much of Europe endured what's now called the Great Famine. Endless rain ruined harvests, and stored grain turned to rot. Chroniclers wrote of people boiling grass and bark just to have something to chew. And yet, somehow, villages didn't vanish. They adapted. They endured. Humanity always does, though it often looks messy while doing it. You wander past a small chapel, its bell frozen silent. A monk shuffles out, wrapped in rough wool. He gives you a look that's both pity and amusement, muttering something about tempting providence. You smile politely, mostly because you can't feel your face. By now, your steps are slower. The world feels muffled, dreamlike. Even the wind seems to hum in rhythm with your breathing. You imagine lying down in the snow, just for a second, to listen to the quiet. The thought is oddly peaceful. Inside a nearby house, laughter flickers like candlelight. A group of villagers are sharing a story about last year's miracle turnip, a vegetable so big it fed 3 families. You laugh too quietly. In winter, even exaggeration feels like warmth. And as you drift closer to the glow of that fire, the smell of smoke and boiling cabbage weaving around you, you start to feel what they must have felt. Not just cold or hunger, but the strange intimacy of shared struggle. The sense that every bite, every ember, is precious precisely because it's fleeting. You lean against the doorway, the glow painting your face in amber light. The woman from before smiles faintly, gestures to an empty stool. You sit. The pot bubbles thick and slow. You listen to the crackle, to the sighs, to the quiet rhythm of survival. Tonight, you're not just an observer. You're one more soul in the long story of winter. Hungry, hopeful, and humming softly to keep the dark at bay. You wake, or maybe you never slept, in the same village, the same drifting smoke, the same cold that feels almost personal now. The snow outside has thickened, pressing down on rooftops like the weight of a sigh. Inside, people are counting things. Sacks of flour, barrels of ale, bundles of dried herbs. Counting and recounting. Because when winter lasts too long, numbers matter more than faith. You step into the storehouse again, ducking under a low beam where dried herbs brush against your hair. The air smells like salt and patience. Here, everything edible tells a story of foresight. You can almost hear the echo of last autumn, the harvest bustle, the hurried drying of apples by the fire, the long queues for the communal mill. Now all that remains is what was wisely hidden away. You run your hand along a wooden shelf, dust rising in little clouds. Clay jars line up in ranks. Beans, lentils, peas, pickled roots. This is medieval savings, not in coins but in calories. The rich might have gold. The poor have turnips. Somewhere behind you, a door creaks and an old man shuffles in, clutching a small ledger. He squints at the shelves, muttering numbers under his breath. You realize you're watching a kind of accountant, except his sums determine who eats and who waits. The act of hoarding, you see, wasn't greed. It was survival theater. A mainstream historical fact slips in, like a cold draft. Medieval granaries were often built with stone bases and raised wooden floors to keep rodents out and moisture away. Some even had church blessings carved into their beams, because if rats respected religion, it would have been convenient. Scholars still argue whether those blessings were faith or early pest deterrent strategies. But either way, the rats didn't care. You crouch near a sack and brush your fingers across its surface. The grains inside shift like dry whispers. Somewhere deep down, you sense that the entire rhythm of the village depends on these tiny seeds. One torn sack, one greedy mouse, and an entire family's winter plan could unravel. People took their storage rituals seriously. Each autumn, they layered food in salt like a blanket, hung strips of meat from hooks, sealed jars with beeswax. Every preserved thing was both food and a time capsule, a promise made to the future self. Some peasants even buried sealed pots underground, trusting the earth to guard them better than walls. It's oddly poetic how they turned preservation into faith. You remember overhearing two villagers arguing about a rumor that a neighboring town had lost its grain to a mysterious fire. One swore it was lightning, the other said divine punishment. You can't help but think, maybe it was just someone desperate enough to steal and clever enough to hide the evidence. Hunger makes philosophers of everyone, but it also makes thieves. You walk past a row of barrels, their lids sealed with pitch. The smell of cured pork sneaks out anyway, salty, smoky, almost divine. Somewhere in your chest, your stomach tightens. You imagine opening one, just a small taste. But no one dares break the seal too soon. There's a superstition that if you start eating from a barrel before midwinter, the rest will spoil. Whether true or not, it's a useful excuse to wait. An odd, almost humorous fact pops up in your mind. Medieval households sometimes placed carved wooden charms, tiny faces or spirit tokens, in their larders to watch the food. A kind of supernatural security camera. You picture it now, a crooked little wooden face glaring down at anyone reaching for extra grain. You chuckle quietly. Fear was often the best refrigerator. You hear footsteps behind you, a woman humming softly as she checks her jars. She notices you looking and smiles. Best to count twice, she says, tapping the top of a jar filled with something pale and pickled. The rats count too. You laugh, but there's no humor in her tone. You follow her outside, back into the white hush of the courtyard. The village looks both dead and alive, frozen but breathing. Smoke threads from every chimney. The snow creaks beneath your boots like old wood. She tells you that in hard winters, they'd share a hunger feast. Everyone bringing what little they could spare, blending misery into something communal. It wasn't about abundance, it was about pretending the cold didn't win. As she speaks, you notice her glance toward her own home, eyes flicking to the roof where drying fish dangle like pale ribbons. You sense the quiet anxiety of her count. The wind blows, carrying the faint scent of brine and smoke. Last year, she says, we lost 3 jars to mold. Her voice lowers. And 1 to temptation. You both know what that means. You wander on, past fences buried in snow and barns that groan under their frozen weight. You pause near a window, where a child presses a small face to the glass, staring at a single loaf cooling on the table. The bread is steaming faintly, and you realize fresh food, even in December, is almost a miracle. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls, slow and dull. The villagers move like clockwork, each performing the same quiet calculations. How much is left? How much to save? How much faith they can afford? You think of your own modern pantry, how easy it is to fill a basket with food and never consider time or season. Here, every bite carries the weight of planning months ago. A forgotten harvest means a lean winter, and yet, somehow they found meaning in it, even comfort. You reach the edge of the village, where a few lonely huts stand apart. A faint smell of smoke leaks from one, but it's thin, like hope fading. You wonder if that house has enough stores to last. Probably not. Yet inside, someone is singing softly. You catch the tune, a lullaby maybe, or a prayer. The art of hoarding wasn't just about storing food. It was about storing peace of mind. Because every sealed jar, every dried apple, whispered a promise. You'll make it through. And sometimes that promise was the only nourishment left. You head back toward the center of the village, snowflakes catching in your hair, the cold biting at your cheeks. You pass the granary again, the flicker of torchlight dancing across its stone walls. Inside, the quiet feels sacred. You rest your hand against the wood, feeling the faint hum of stored life behind it. The barrels, the jars, the bundles, they're all asleep, waiting to be woken by hunger. And somehow you feel a strange comfort in knowing that even when the world freezes, people have always found ways to keep something alive, if only a jar of hope under a layer of salt. You wake to the sound of teeth, your own chattering. The fire in the cottage has burned down to a lazy red glow, and someone nearby is slicing through a loaf of bread so dark it almost blends with the shadows. You lean closer, curious. The crust cracks under the knife like brittle wood, scattering a few crumbs that the dog immediately snaps up. You've seen bread before, obviously, but this is different. Dense, heavy, as if gravity itself had been baked into it. The smell isn't sweet or buttery. It's sour, earthy, faintly bitter, like the ground after rain. You watch as a woman dips her piece into a bowl of thin broth to soften it. She doesn't chew so much as press it between her teeth. Bread, but make it sad. You reach for a slice and it weighs more than it should. This isn't food, it's labor preserved. Every handful of grain was ground by hand, sifted through coarse cloth, and baked in a communal oven where villagers lined up like penitents. You take a bite. It's rough, chewy, tasting faintly of smoke and ash. You cough a little. The woman grins, missing 2 teeth. That means it's good, she says. Bread in medieval winters wasn't just a meal, it was a mirror of class. The wealthy ate white loaves made from finely sifted wheat flour, soft and fragrant. The poor, like the people here, made do with whatever was left. Rye, barley, oats, even ground peas or acorns. Some added bran or sawdust to stretch the dough. You picture that. A baker scraping together whatever could be baked into hope. A historical fact drifts through your sleepy mind. During the 13th century, England's Assize of Bread and Ale law regulated loaf prices according to grain costs. Bakers who cheated customers could be fined, flogged, or, in one famous case, paraded through town with a stale loaf tied around their neck. Scholars still argue whether that punishment was meant to shame or simply entertain a hungry public. The woman across from you tears her bread in half and hands you a piece. "Rye keeps you full," she mutters. You nod, though your jaw already aches. There's something humbling about this meal. It doesn't invite indulgence. It demands gratitude. Outside, the snow has eased, leaving the world silver and silent. You step out, bread in hand, and watch a line forming near the communal oven. Smoke rises from its chimney, carrying the faint scent of baking and scorched wood. People shuffle forward, clutching small dough bundles wrapped in cloth. The baker, a broad man with soot on his face and the authority of a minor deity, pulls loaves from the glowing mouth of the oven. The heat fogs your vision. He taps each loaf with a wooden paddle, listening for that hollow sound, the medieval equivalent of quality control. When one cracks unevenly, he frowns. "Too cold," he mutters. "The dough slept longer than I did." You smile. Everyone in line chuckles softly. Humor, it seems, rises even in hard times. An odd detail. Some bakers, short on grain, mix ground beans or chestnuts into the flour to stretch their supply. A few even used pulverized tree bark during famines, an invention equal parts desperate and creative. You can almost taste the grit in your teeth. And yet, people still called it bread. They had to. Naming it kept dignity alive. You notice a small boy clutching a lump of dough shaped like a tiny animal. His mother leans down to whisper, "Don't eat it before it bakes. It's bad luck." He nods solemnly, but his eyes are fixed on the oven's glow. You remember, suddenly, that warmth is its own kind of feast. As you wait, the baker slides a new batch in. You feel the heat on your face, the comforting roar of fire that feels almost alive. This oven is the heartbeat of the village. Without it, there'd be no morning ritual, no reason to gather. It's more than cooking, it's communion. A woman nearby tells you about the holy loaf, a piece of bread saved from Christmas Eve, dried and kept to bless the household. Sometimes it was crumbled into spring planting soil to ensure fertility. Scholars still debate whether this was a Christian or a pagan habit that just refused to die. You suspect it's both. Faith, like bread, takes whatever shape survival demands. You finally get your loaf, small, misshapen, but still warm. You hold it between your palms, the crust rough like bark, the center faintly steaming. The smell of it is strangely comforting, even with its bitterness. You tear off a piece, and it's chewy, stubborn. You chew slower this time, thinking about how many hands touched the grain before it became this bite. And you realize, in this world, bread isn't just food, it's a story. Every loaf tells who you are, how much you have, and how much you can endure. The nobles dine on delicate wheat. The peasants grind whatever grows. Yet when the snow piles high and hunger gnaws, everyone ends up at the same table of humility. The baker calls out to the crowd, announcing the next batch won't be ready for hours. People groan good-naturedly, adjusting their cloaks, rubbing their hands together. A man near you jokes that if patience were edible, they'd never go hungry. You laugh even though your jaw is still sore from chewing. You walk away, the loaf tucked inside your coat for warmth. Each step stirs little puffs of frost from the ground. You pass homes where people tear bread into stew, soften it with ale, or feed crumbs to chickens that look equally miserable. The bread sustains not just humans, but the rhythm of life itself. You pause by the edge of the frozen field, where a single crow hops from stalk to stalk, scavenging for leftover grains. For a second, you envy its simplicity. It doesn't count or store. It just eats. Then again, you think maybe it's hoarding too in its own way. Back in the cottage, you settle near the dying fire. The last bite of bread sits on your tongue, turning soft, almost sweet. Hunger, it seems, is the best seasoning. You close your eyes and listen to the crackle of embers, the low murmur of voices outside, and the quiet satisfaction that, for tonight at least, you've eaten. Somewhere deep in the night, a dog barks, and the smell of freshly baked rye still lingers in the air. A reminder that survival, sometimes, tastes like burnt crust and hard edges. You wake to the sound of simmering, soft, rhythmic, hypnotic. The kind of sound that seeps into your half-dreaming mind and makes you think of warmth before you even open your eyes. When you do, you're greeted by a sight both humble and holy. A pot hanging over a small fire, its lid trembling gently as bubbles rise from within. You shuffle closer, rubbing sleep, or maybe frost, from your eyes. The air is thick with the scent of something edible. Maybe. It's not quite soup, not quite stew. It's pottage, the medieval cure-all for hunger, boredom, and whatever despair winter tried to serve up. You watch the cook, a wiry man with sleeves rolled high, stirring the pot with a spoon longer than your arm. It's not much, he says without looking up, but it fills the silence. He drops in something greenish, dried herbs, maybe, and gives the mixture another slow stir. Steam coils upward, carrying the faint smell of cabbage and hope. You peer into the pot and see a swirl of lentils, onions, and something that might once have been meat. It's a murky, brownish concoction, but there's comfort in its chaos. Everything edible, or nearly so, finds its way into this bubbling universe. You dip a ladle and taste it. It's fine. Salty, a little smoky, like the ghost of a real meal, but it warms your chest, and that's all that matters. You can feel it settling into you one spoonful at a time, the kind of warmth that doesn't ask questions. Pottage wasn't a recipe, it was a survival strategy. Every family had their own version, constantly evolving with whatever ingredients hadn't spoiled. Some days it leaned vegetable, other days it was practically flavored water. But it was always there, a medieval slow cooker, endlessly reheated, refilled, and reimagined. A historical fact floats in, clear as the firelight. In 14th century Europe, pottage was so essential that the daily pot became a legal term in some manor records. Landlords counted tenants' grain and legume use to estimate taxes. Scholars still argue whether that was economic genius or just bureaucratic nosiness. You suspect both. You watch a young boy approach with a handful of scraps, bits of carrot, a few wilted greens, a crust of bread. The cook nods and adds them to the pot, muttering a quick blessing under his breath. You ask what it means, and he shrugs. Old words, he says. They make the broth kinder. He ladles a portion into a wooden bowl and hands it to you. Eat while it's honest, he says, which sounds suspiciously like wisdom. You blow on the spoon, watching the steam curl and twist in the air like a ghost escaping. The flavor is simple but grounding. Tastes like survival wearing a brave face. You imagine generations of people doing this exact same thing. Stirring, tasting, hoping. Nearby, two old women sit by the fire, gossiping between spoonfuls. One leans in and whispers. They say if you stir counterclockwise, you invite misfortune. The other smirks. I've been stirring wrong my whole life then. Maybe that's why my husband left. They both laugh, a dry, rattling sound like winter branches. You chuckle quietly too. Humor, again the secret spice. An odd detail catches your attention. Someone has tied a small bundle of dried nettles above the pot. You ask why. Keeps the stew from turning bitter. A man says from across the room. You're pretty sure that's nonsense, but you like it anyway. People here fight off bad luck with herbs and elbow grease. Science may roll its eyes, but superstition, in its own way, tastes comforting. You think about how different this would look in a castle. Their pottage wasn't peasant food, it was art. Cooks added saffron, almonds, and minced venison. The difference between peasant and noble wasn't hunger, it was seasoning. You shake your head, spoon in hand, amused at how even in the coldest winters, status managed to sneak into the pot. Someone starts humming softly near the fire, a lullaby without words. The rhythm matches the gentle bubbling of the stew. The sound is hypnotic, and for a moment you forget where you are. You're just floating, warmed from the inside, surrounded by flickering light, the world reduced to the color of soup and smoke. Then someone opens the door, and a gust of wind slaps the moment away. The fire wobbles. The cook curses softly and tosses another log on. The door closes. Silence returns. You dip your spoon again, slower this time. You notice the little details. A thin slice of turnip, the grit of unpolished barley, a strand of leek that escaped cutting. Everything here has texture, imperfections that feel real. Pottage, the cook says suddenly, isn't food, it's memory. He nods at the pot, his expression unreadable. My grandmother stirred this same recipe. Different ingredients, same hunger. You realize that every bowl in this room carries the same story. One of patience, practicality, and quiet defiance. They might not have had much, but they had this. The daily act of stirring, sharing, surviving. You step outside, and the world smells faintly, alive again. Not in a springtime kind of way, more in the something's definitely fermenting in that barrel kind of way. The air carries a sour tang, sharp enough to sting your nose, but not unpleasant. You follow the scent toward a low stone shed where the villagers store their projects. Those strange bubbling experiments that keep them fed, buzzed, and slightly amused all winter long. Inside, it's warm and damp. Rows of wooden casks and clay jars line the walls, each covered with a rag or sealed with wax. Some hiss softly, others just sit, quietly alive. You catch a whiff of ale, vinegar, and something suspiciously cabbage-like. Welcome to the heart of medieval chemistry, where the line between brilliant innovation and accidental poison was very, very thin. Fermentation wasn't a choice. It was survival magic. You couldn't refrigerate, you couldn't freeze, but you could let time and microbes do the heavy lifting. You lift a lid carefully and peer inside one jar. It's full of pale green leaves swimming in cloudy liquid. A woman nearby notices your curiosity and smirks. "Sauerkraut," she says proudly, "keeps the belly clean, keeps the breath wicked." You laugh, she's not wrong about either. You taste a small piece. The sour, salty, strangely addictive. The vinegar bite wakes up your tongue after so many bland stews. You realize how clever this is, not just for flavor, but for health. Fermented food kept bellies strong when fresh produce vanished. The woman leans closer and whispers conspiratorially. "The monks say it keeps the bad spirits away, too, the ones that sneak in through the stomach." You nod solemnly. In this world, science and superstition drink from the same cup. A historical fact rises like foam in your mind. Medieval brewers, especially in Northern Europe, made small ale, a low-alcohol beer brewed weak enough to drink daily, even for children. Water was risky, full of parasites, but ale? Safe, sterilized by brewing. Scholars still argue whether medieval folks were tipsy all the time or just hydrated efficiently. You raise an imaginary mug to that debate. Across the shed, a man is inspecting a barrel with great seriousness. He taps the side, listens, then nods. "Still breathing," he says. You arch a brow. "Your ale." He shakes his head. "My saucer of souls." He lifts the lid, revealing what looks like bubbling porridge. Cabbage, oats, barley. Whatever's dying gets reborn in here. You can't tell if he's joking, but he beams like a proud parent anyway. It's oddly poetic, you think, this idea of transformation. Decay turned into nourishment, rot turned into rhythm. It's alchemy without gold. You move deeper inside, and your nose leads you to another discovery. A series of clay pots filled with bubbling honey wine mead. The scent is warm and floral, like the memory of summer trapped in liquid form. You dip a finger, carefully, respectfully, and taste. The sweet, then sharp, leaving a little fire in your chest. The brewer, a plump woman with pink cheeks, grins. "That's the first batch," she says. "Good for the soul, bad for singing." You ask her how long it takes to ferment. She shrugs. "Until it's ready to forgive you." You decide not to ask what that means. An odd detail pops into your mind, one that sounds like it should be false but isn't. In medieval Scandinavia, people sometimes buried barrels of fish or shark to ferment underground for months. When they dug it up, it was considered a delicacy and a test of bravery. The smell was legendary. Even some Viking sagas mention it as the meal of courage. You imagine opening that in your modern kitchen and instantly losing all your neighbors. You can't help but smile. People will endure anything for a bite of comfort, even if that comfort smells like a chemistry experiment gone wrong. You watch a group of villagers gathered around a barrel, cups in hand, drinking ale and trading stories. Their laughter fills the shed, echoing against the stone walls. You realize that fermentation didn't just preserve food, it preserved connection. It gave people a reason to gather, to share, to forget the cold outside for a little while. A young man offers you a cup. You hesitate but accept. The ale is cloudy and warm, slightly sour, but undeniably alive. It fizzles faintly on your tongue, the taste of time itself. Someone starts humming, a slow, meandering tune. Another joins in. The room sways with quiet mirth. You think about how strange and beautiful it is, that a drink born out of necessity could also create joy. Maybe the secret of medieval survival wasn't just salt or storage. It was fermentation of the spirit, too. The woman with the mead taps your shoulder. "You know what we say?" she asks, her eyes twinkling. "A good brew should taste like patience." You nod. That tracks. Everything here, every jar, every bottle, every life, is built on patience. The smell of yeast and malt grows stronger as the fire crackles in the corner. You sit beside it, cup in hand, watching the barrels breathe softly in the dim light. You imagine each one as a sleeping beast, slow and content, turning time into sustenance. The woman leans over and whispers, "Sometimes we talk to them, the barrels." You raise a brow. "Talk?" She shrugs. "You'd be surprised what listens when you're hungry." You smile. The line between ritual and necessity blurs again, but in the most human way possible. Maybe fermentation really is a conversation with the invisible, the waiting, the future. You take another sip. It's warmer now, sweeter, softer on the tongue. The fire crackles louder, or maybe you just notice it more. You can almost feel the hum of microbes, the quiet miracle of transformation happening all around you. When you step back outside, the cold air hits you like truth. But there's a glow in your chest that wasn't there before. A warmth made not of fire, but of life still bubbling somewhere inside you. The wind carries the faint scent of smoke and sour cabbage, and you can't help but grin. The village may be frozen, but underneath it's still alive, fermenting quietly, waiting for spring. You take another sip. It's warmer now, sweeter, softer on the tongue. The fire crackles louder, or maybe you just notice it more. You can almost feel the hum of microbes, the quiet miracle of transformation happening all around you. When you step back outside, the cold air hits you like truth. But there's a glow in your chest that wasn't there before. A warmth made not of fire, but of life still bubbling somewhere inside you. The wind carries the faint scent of smoke and sour cabbage, and you can't help but grin. The village may be frozen, but underneath it's still alive, fermenting quietly, waiting for spring. Here salt is life. You can almost taste its price in the air. The man laughs as you rub your eyes from the smoke. "Ain't for comfort," he says. "It's for keeping ghosts at bay." You raise an eyebrow, but he continues. "Not the dead ones, the hungry ones." He means the winter spirits, the metaphorical kind. You nod solemnly. Everyone in this season is haunted by appetite. He walks you through the ritual of curing. First, the slaughter in early winter, when the cold itself becomes a tool. Then, the rub-down, handfuls of coarse salt massaged into flesh until it stings the fingers. Sometimes honey or smoke was added for flavor, but the goal was always the same: make decay wait. An odd, almost absurd detail slips into your thoughts. In parts of medieval Germany, people preserved sausages by submerging them in molten animal fat, sealing them like candles in wax. It worked until someone forgot where they buried them. Imagine digging that up by accident in spring. Surprise dinner. The man hands you a small slice of smoked pork. You chew carefully. It's tough, salty enough to make your lips sting, but there's flavor there, deep and ancient. You close your eyes, and it's as if you can taste the entire process. The animal, the smoke, the months of waiting. "Good?" he asks. You nod. He grins, a little proud. "That's the last of the sow from summer." fed on acorns and scraps. She keeps us yet. There's tenderness in his tone, a strange reverence. You realize that in this world, meat isn't abundance. It's memory made edible. He shows you another rack, smaller cuts, maybe venison or hare. The Lord takes his share, he says with a shrug. Always does. But we keep what we can hide. You catch his glance, half mischief, half defiance. The peasant's quiet rebellion isn't loud or bloody. It's salted and hung above the hearth. You hear faint laughter outside. A woman is scolding a child for sneaking jerky from the rafters. You step out into the light and watch them. The boy grins through a mouthful, guilty but pleased. His mother sighs and lets it go. In a world where treats are rare, maybe small thefts are forgiven as easily as hunger itself. You wander toward another hut, smaller and colder. Inside, a family gathers around a table. They're sharing a small pot of broth flavored with a single bone. The smell fills the room, a meager luxury stretched thin. One of them explains that they keep the bone for weeks, reboiling it until it gives nothing but water. Still tastes like comfort, he says with a shrug. You believe him. You think about how modern leftovers last a few days in the fridge. Here, leftovers last seasons if you're clever. Survival is an act of creative patience. A small, scholarly debate flickers in your mind. Historians still argue whether winter meat shortages shaped medieval fasting traditions, or if religion simply adapted to the limits of the larder. Maybe faith followed hunger, not the other way around. You smile at the irony. Sanctity born from scarcity. Back outside, the smoke from the curing hut drifts into the sky, carrying the scent of salted life across the frozen fields. The villagers walk past it without noticing. They've grown numb to the smell. To them, it's background music. To you, it's symphony. You linger by the door one last time. Inside, the man tends his fire with quiet devotion. Each flicker of flame is both guardian and executioner. Too much heat, and everything's lost. Too little and rot wins. There's a delicate balance, this dance with decay. He glances at you and says softly, when the cold comes, the living envy the meat. You don't ask what he means. You already know. As you walk away, your clothes absorb the smell of smoke and salt. It clings to you like memory, following you through the pale morning air. And as strange as it sounds, it feels like comfort. The scent of survival, the echo of a feast you'll never see but somehow still feel. The fire has long since faded, but the warmth lingers, soft, steady, like an echo that doesn't want to leave. You sit in the quiet, listening to the hush that only arrives after stories end. The snow outside has settled into perfect stillness, each flake resting as though the whole world finally exhaled. The faint scent of smoke clings to the air, mingling with memory, grain, salt, soup, and all the small, stubborn ways people once refused to let hunger win. You think back to everything you've seen. The frostbitten fields, the patient hands stirring pottage, the laughter rising over bowls of something barely called food. They didn't just eat to live, they lived to remember. Every meal, no matter how small, was a quiet act of defiance. A promise whispered against the cold. We're still here. The wind outside sighs against the shutters, low and rhythmic. You imagine the villagers sleeping now, wrapped in rough blankets, their bellies full enough, their dreams flavored with smoke and the faint hum of tomorrow. In their world, hope isn't loud. It's a flicker, steady and soft, the same way your heartbeat feels as you drift closer to sleep. Your eyelids grow heavy. The images blur, bread dark as earth, the shimmer of snow on salted meat, the glow of ale by the fire. Everything melts together into one warm, drowsy haze. You can almost hear the faint clatter of spoons in another time, the laughter of people who made peace with winter. So, let the night stretch around you like a blanket. Let the quiet take over, slow and kind. You've wandered far enough for one story, and if you listen carefully between your own breaths, you might still hear it. The crackle of a medieval hearth, the whisper of a pot simmering gently through the dark.